What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Today it is the LazyDaze channel and we're back at it again with some more history reaction for you guys today, and we have a special guest. We have Ash, and we're going to be doing some epic history TV's content for you, and we're going to be doing the 5 Great Viking Deaths. As you can tell, we both like a bit of Viking history over here. So we're just sort of looking forward to finding out a bit more information, seeing if there is stuff that we didn't know, and if we didn't know, and just sort of finding out and enjoying this journey with you guys. If you guys are enjoying our content, then please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we're just going to jump straight into this one. The Vikings and their descendants speak for themselves. Their many voices express a spirit which is like no other on earth. Professor Tom Shippey. What is that bottom bit there?
Laughing shall I die.
I would imagine that's a book.
Probably, yeah.
Paper. 2018.
AD 793. Raiders appear without warning off England's east coast. They land at Lindisfarne, known as Holy Island, where they slaughter monks, steal treasure and holy relics, then vanish back across the Dark Sea. It was Western Europe's first traumatic encounter with the Vikings.
Elaborates.
For 3 centuries, these pagan pirates from Scandinavia terrorized Europe, raiding, extorting, enslaving, and ultimately conquering.
Leif Erikson up the top.
They roamed deep into Russia and the Mediterranean, even daring to attack what they called Miklagard, the great city Constantinople.
Yeah, mate.
Viking longships and a mastery of navigation.
When you think about it one by one, it's not that
to
mad. But when you see it all at the same time, it's
with
like,
the element of surprise.
Mate, every river they
But their enemies, including Anglo-Saxons and Franks, themselves belonged to proud warrior cultures. Was there something more
again,
that gave the
it's
Viking
how much the Danish law affected so many other regions as well. It's so interesting how integrated it got into so many different cultures.
well, they had so many like proxy states, like especially obviously in England you had York, which is like the main one, and you had the whole the Silk Road through like the Med. As soon as they set up there, that's when like the integration started happening, and that's where people started being like, oh, actually, you aren't as bad as you first thought.
You're not as bad as we thought.
Just please take
Professor Tom is an expert in Viking history and medieval literature. He believes their success can be attributed in part to a unique mindset.
This is going to be
mindset revealed in the Viking Sagas.
Fucking hell, I'm going to learn 20.
Many sagas written in the Vikings' own language, which is Old Norse. There's the famous Sagas of Icelanders, but there's also Konungasögur, that's Sagas of Kings. There's Fornaldasögur, Sagas of Old Times. These are looked on with suspicion these days because they were written hundreds of years later, mostly in far-off.
Well, they looked at as speculation. But the New Testament, that's fine.
I wouldn't say the New Testament is fine.
No, I'm not saying it's fine either. I'm not saying any of it's fucking fine. But if that logic applies there,
I see where your logic's coming from, but I don't think the people who say that the New Testament, I don't think that's logic.
Far off Iceland, and people say, oh well, you can't rely on those for history. They're fiction. Well, actually, a lot of it is fiction, and some of it's fairy tale, and you can pick that out quite easily. But a lot of it isn't fiction. I think it's based on family memories. And people who can't read and write often have good memories, and they take memories seriously, and they pass them on. Leaving the fact and fiction question aside, they do all express, I think, a very characteristic and consistent attitude, which I call the Viking mindset. And that's really quite distinctive. 2 of the distinctive things about it are the fascination with scenes of death, with famous death songs, with famous last stands, all that kind of thing. And the other is the very characteristic sense of humour, which I call, I'm afraid, it's not good sense of humour, it's bad sense of humour. It's the kind of humour which is really rather cruel or grim.
My kind.
One thing he was saying about I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was like the Viking, not the Viking way.
He was saying that the stories have two common characteristics. One was where it was a last stand death sort of song.
It was after that bit. I can't remember.
And then the second part was that their humour was.
No, there was a bit he said, because it reminded me, like they didn't call themselves Vikings. Like they I think.
So it was before he started about.
It must have been, yeah. Because they didn't. They had what, if my memory serves me right, it was that it was their way of life was Viking, not them themselves. They were
either Scandinavian or
they didn't really they didn't really refer to themselves as Norsemen either. It was only when they come to England they were like, oh, that we're north from you, cool. Cool. I guess we're the Norse guys.
I definitely knew that they didn't.
That's it. The Viking mindset. That's it. Sorry, Viking mindset.
But then that's fine, because I can understand that being a mindset.
Yeah, 100%. That's what he was right there. But he was like, some people obviously like they don't realise that.
They don't realise that Vikings weren't called Vikings.
No, that was like post, like Saxons. They were Saxon. Like other ones, they were that.
Are just Vikings called Vikings because they raided.
Exactly.
That's what a Viking is. Raiding.
Yeah.
We'll look at 5 famous death scenes from the old Norse sagas to see what they can tell us about the Viking mindset.
Okay, so we're starting with the death of Ragnar Lothbrok, Northumbria, England, 864 AD.
Many tales are told of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. His own saga says he was the son of a Swedish
hairy
king
britches.
and
Hairy britches.
Lothbrok.
But when he sailed to England seeking further fame and riches, he was shipwrecked off the coast of Northumbria. He was taken prisoner by its Christian king, Ella, who decided to inflict a terrible death.
What's a silly man?
He had him thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. As he faced death, Ragnar called out to the king.
The famous line from the death of Ragnar is Gnithia mundu grisir ef galtar hag vissi. The piggies would grunt if they knew how the old boar died.
And they did.
Grunt. But it also kind of sounds like grunt. And I think you could actually translate it, go oink oink. The piggies would go oink oink if they knew how the old boar died. It's a joke. And the joke is actually on King Ella, because there's this barnyard vocabulary, piggies and oink, but what it means is, my sons are going to come, and what they do to you won't bear thinking about. It's a threat. The funny thing is, although it's a late saga, this story about the piggies was known earlier, because it was actually quoted by a Latin chronicler.
Oh, okay.
He'd heard about the piggies. He got the phrase right. He just didn't understand what it meant. He thought Ragnar was saying, if my sons knew about this, they'd come and rescue me. But he didn't. He wasn't hoping for rescue. He knew he hadn't got any hope. He was saying, my sons, when they hear about this, then they'll avenge me. And of course they did.
Tenfold.
Yeah, tenfold indeed. Obviously, you got the Viking TV show. If you haven't already, head over and watch that.
It's not good. Even slightly accurate, but in terms of authenticity, it's like Saving Private Ryan. Not realistic whatsoever, but authentic as fuck. The shit they used was shit they had. And
I see what you're saying.
Second World War stuff is easier to keep in guidelines, obviously. But Vikings, and I think to a point, even Game of Thrones, not that I've seen much of it, but one thing they tried to stick to was authenticity. So it's a medieval thing.
There was some mistakes.
Dragons and shit, and they were mistakes, but for the most part they tried to stick to it, and Vikings is probably the best for it. Vikings probably stick to it the closest, because they wanted to be as accurate to the
like the culture, I would say, as accurate to the time and the culture, and got those things on point,
but
even though
to tell
it wasn't
stories their own way.
That's it, exactly. And even though it wasn't accurate, that storyline was was amazing.
I mean, they had the whole thing with like Ragnar going into Paris, and that wasn't even him. That's Bjorn, but it's fine.
were very real. In 865, the Ragnarsons landed in England with a great army, rampaging across East Anglia and Northumbria, killing King Ella.
Oh yeah, Halfdan. He wasn't his kid thing, was he?
Historical
no, he
events
wasn't. No.
And the saga tale of Ragnar's death.
England was invaded by men who were
what an
very
epic
early
death
on
as well,
identified
though.
as
I
Ragnarsons.
mean, what a death!
My suggestion would be that the whole story of Ragnar's death in the snake pit was made up later on in order to motivate the invasion of England. Why did the Ragnarsons invade England? They did it to take vengeance for their father. And so you make up a story about the death of the father and the way that the vengeance was motivated.
Go on, you got this one.
King Rolf avenged Lear, Denmark, early 6th century AD. Probably butchered it.
According to legend, Rolf Kraki was a great Danish king of the 6th century, a Danish King Arthur. His great hall stood near Lear, where he entertained a famous band of champions. But many sought his throne. His own cousin, Hjörvarthr, made a surprise. He sought his throne. His own cousin, Hjörvarthr, made a surprise dawn attack on the king's hall.
Rude.
Yeah, rude.
After a desperate last stand, Rolf lay dead, surrounded by his champions. Only one man survived. Vögr, the weakest man in
He's even
Rolf's
got a shit
court.
name.
Yeah.
He'd been the butt of all jokes, even when he'd sworn to avenge Rolf's death. Now he was hauled before the new king, Hjörvarthr.
Rolf is dead, and all his champions are dead as well. That's the right thing to do, except Vögr, who is dragged out of a pile of bodies. And for some reason, Hjörvarthr thinks it would be a good idea to get a pledge of allegiance from Rolf's last surviving champion. So they get Vögr, and he is called up, asked to swear allegiance to Hjörvarthr, and Hjörvarthr gives him his sword to swear allegiance on. Bad idea. Vögr picks it up, runs Hjörvarthr through. That's the end of Hjörvarthr and the Skilding dynasty.
Nice.
And of course, Vögr is immediately
Fucking
killed.
nice.
But he has fulfilled his vow. So it's another example, really, of the Viking love of, shall we say, wit, of being
Cunning.
able to turn the
Yeah,
tables
cunning, I like that
in
one.
a funny kind of way. Once again,
What a fool for
Ragnar's
handing your
joke
sword
was
over.
on
Yeah,
his
what an
side.
absolute sausage.
Yeah. Especially with, alright, with all the knowledge I have of Vikings.
Like, you are Viking. You know what you do. So why have you just given it to him?
I know what I would do.
Fucking idiot.
Yeah, like.
You know what? Maybe you didn't deserve to be king if you did that. Maybe it's a good thing that happened because you're a fucking idiot.
You are. At least have your own weapon. Or
Yeah,
like,
innit?
that's what I mean.
Don't just.
It's just the more you think about it, the more stupid
It's like, you
it
know,
gets.
when you have an argument and then like later on you're like, wish I fucking said that. It's worse. It's worse when you've got to look back at things in history and you're like, why did you do that? Are you fucking stupid?
Yeah. And we think we have all the foresight.
Yeah.
But when we're in that situation, we're making the same mistakes.
in a sort of way.
Legends about King Rolf come from a tumultuous period of Europe's history, traditionally known as the Dark Ages. But recent discoveries suggest the tales of King Rolf have a basis in fact.
King Rolf is the Danish King Arthur. They lived at about the same time in the early 6th century. For a long time, the story of King Rolf was regarded rather like the story of King Arthur, it couldn't be true. But then the archaeologists, alerted by a chance discovery, started looking at the traditional site of King Rolf's court, which is now the small village of Lejre in Denmark. And much to their surprise, they discovered the site of one enormous hall after another. I think they have now found 6 of them, all through the Viking and pre-Viking era. So that part of the story at least was true. Lejre, once upon a time Hlethraborg, really was a major power center in the early Viking period.
Yomsviking.
The Yomsvikings were a legendary group of Viking mercenaries picked men bound by a code of honor. According to Old Norse sagas, they had a fortified base on the Baltic coast at Jomsvikings. In 986, they were recruited by the King of Denmark to subjugate Jarl Håkon of Lauder. But at Hjörungavágr, they suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Jarl Håkon and his son Jarl Eirik. Vikings rarely offered or expected mercy. After the battle, the Yomsviking prisoners were lined up for execution.
The beheading started, and the Yomsvikings, who had a code of their own which forbade them to express fear at any point. One of them, for instance, said he would not kneel down to be beheaded. He insisted on standing up and being beheaded from the front, so that people could see that he did not flinch from the blow.
That's pretty hardcore.
That's
pretty fucking hardcore. Holy shit.
Mate, the Vikings were something else, mate.
Fucking hell.
They really just didn't care.
I mean, I suppose the modern day equivalent's when like people getting executed by firing squad refuse a blindfold. Yeah. It's about as close as you're going to get nowadays. No, just fucking chop me from the front, you cunt.
Yeah, but to see that I won't flinch and then to not flinch, like...
Just...
oh.
That's a long way to fall as well, though.
That is.
It's going to leave a black eye.
Worried about my hair.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Could somebody very kindly take my hair and pull it over my head, and then the beheading can go on?
Is this?
But as the axe falls, he jerks his head back, and the falling axe hits on the hands of the man who's been holding his hair. Well, that's
fucking funny.
For you.
They did that in Vikings, but in a different bit. But like that was so good.
It was so.
He thinks he's never seen anything so funny in all his life. It was such a good joke. He says, "Well, we'll let you off." And the Yomsviking very properly says,
Imagine being that guy. Oh, you'll let him off? You'll fucking let him off, will you? You can. You let him off.
I'd be so
I'm glad you found it funny, but I haven't got any hands.
You're so fucking mad. That's outrageous.
Hey, you know what? Stop this. I'm joining the Yomsvikings. I'm coming back for you with no hands.
Just gets two spikes.
Yeah, just attached.
Treat him like a pincushion.
Get all the others off too. So the other Yomsvikings are then all spared. Well, you know, obviously complete fiction. No, can't believe a word of it.
Psych.
Yeah, about 15 miles away in that direction, where we're standing, just recently they were digging for a new road, and they came upon a pile of skeletons. About
yikes.
50 odd. And a separate pile of skulls. All the skeletons had been beheaded. And analysis showed they were all male, they were mostly young, and they were all Scandinavians.
Yikes.
Yikes indeed.
Okay, so there was a mass beheading, just as described in the saga.
That's not that uncommon, though.
Several of the men
Ever seen the nicest video?
From the front, just as in the saga.
Savage. Savage.
So, once again, what appeared to be complete fiction turns out to have some corroboration in hard fact.
Olaf Haraldsson, King of Norway, the man who'd one day become its patron saint, had been a feared Viking before he became a Christian king. In 1029, the Danes, supported by
Olaf
local jarls,
Vikings,
drove Olaf into exile. When he and his followers returned the next year to reclaim the throne, they were met by a huge army of hostile pagan farmers. Retreat was not an option for Olaf.
And that's a long old run.
That is a long old run.
On the morning of battle, the restless king rose early and asked his poet, Thormod, to sing to him, to pass the hours before the army gathered.
Imagine being so bored. Just like, Magic, can you sing for me?
Which is actually...
Could you imagine?
Us just sitting in a room, just like we've got nothing to do. Like, yo, Jack, show us them windpipes.
Yeah, literally. He just belts out the classic.
You make me feel so young.
A poem supposed to be sung by Björki, on the morning of the last stand of King Rolf, which we've discussed already.
Okay.
Dagger is opkomen Dunja Hana Fjadrar. Maules vil mugum at vinna elfidi. Vaki eok vaki vinna huvud aller inni utstu adils of sinar. Haar in hath crepi Rolfel skutandi. Uitum godir men, there is eki fligja. Vekka utrat vini, neat viefs runum. Vek uster hudum, hildar at leki. The day has come up. The roosters clap their wings. Time for the wretched serfs to do the heavy labor. Wake now, wake, company of friends, all you best ones of Athil's people. Har the hard grip, Rolf the shooter, men of good birth, they who do not flee. I do not wake you to wine, nor the whispers of women. I wake you to the hard sport of Hilda.
It seems a strange choice for a poem because it is in a way a suicide poem. It's saying we're all going to get killed. Is this a good morale raiser? Yeah, they're Vikings. They think it's great. It's super fun. Yeah. Just the thing. Let's get started on the back.
I tell you what, I feel very motivated now.
Yeah, that's it.
Olaf and his men.
We either win or we end up in Valhalla.
Literally.
Men rising to face certain death proved a premonition.
The battle is lost. King Olaf is killed, fighting in the front rank, and is brought down by a series of spear and axe blows. And as you would expect, all his chosen companions, all his bodyguard are killed around him. But Thormod the poet, survives. Not his fault, he just happens to survive. And at the end of the battle, when it's all over, he laments that he has not been allowed to join his king. And at that moment, an arrow comes flying from nowhere and hits him. And the obvious implication is the dead king sent it. He sent it so as to give Thormod his wish that he could join Olaf. And Thormod then composes a poem about his own wound and dies without quite finishing it. He dies on his feet, still reciting the poem, but he doesn't complete the last
That
line.
would piss me off. I'd be in the afterlife like, you motherfuckers!
By a bystander. And the bystander is the teenage Harald Hardrada.
We all know about him, don't we? Here we go, Stamford Bridge.
Harald Hardrada grew to become king of Norway.
Our last big win, and then Normans. His
adventures led him east to the city of Kiev, where he served.
We haven't been us since like before the Romans.
Yeah, before the Romans.
We were Celts.
He commanded the Varangian Guard of the Byzantine Emperor.
We are one of the most mixed.
Yeah, we're mongrels. We're dirty mongrels. Like, I don't get why people are so like, I'm proud British, I'm fully British. Oh, so you're German, French, Norse,
Danish,
like fucking anywhere that has stepped foot in.
The Mediterranean, because the Romans,
literally, man, literally. I just, oh god, we're so stupid, so stupid.
Eve, cruel and acquisitive, and in 1066 set his sights on the English throne. But King Harold Godwinson marched north to meet him, moving so rapidly he caught the Vikings off guard at Stamford Bridge.
The thing about the Battle of Stamford Bridge is that Harald Hardrada and his invasion force, they were caught napping. Harold Godwinson
they didn't want to fight at the bridge.
Very quickly.
They didn't want to fight at the bridge.
Marching through York, and the first thing the Norwegians knew about it was seeing the glint of weapons approaching. But it was a hot day, and the Norwegians had left their heavy equipment, especially their armor and their shields, down on their ships. So they were actually facing an armored force without their armor.
Heedless of the risk, Hardrada advanced into battle at the head of his men. According to the Heimskringla Sagas, written by the Icelander Snorri Sturluson, he composed poetry even now.
Fram gungum veri fylkegu, brunju lösir und bla regjar, Hjalmar skina, hefkat mina, nu ligger struð vart at skipum niðri. Forward we go in formation, without armor against blue steel edges. Helmets shine, I don't have mine. Now our gear lies down with the ships.
I think it's quite good, actually, the poem. But Harald, who is a terrible poetic snob, thinks about it for a bit and says, no, that was too simple. And then he produces another poem in a much more complex and high-class meter and says that's much better.
Hardrada threw himself into the thick of the fighting, unarmoured, wielding his sword with both hands. Fearless and defiant to the end, he died with an English arrow in his throat, alongside most of his army. He is often called the last Viking.
According to the saga, the Norwegians arrived in 400 ships and the survivors went home in 24.
Imagine getting an arrow through the throat.
Yeah, man.
Like, can't talk. It's there.
Can't do shit.
You
know you're fucked.
Yeah,
you ain't gonna die yet.
Yeah.
And the fact that the arrow's in there might be prolonging it as well.
Yeah.
Because it might have gone through your jugular, but it's still just holding it, so you're like pissing blood every time you move.
Yeah.
But if you stay still, it will plug it.
That's it, and like you can't take it out, or if you do, you have to snap it from the back.
Yeah.
And then pull it out this. Imagine feeling the wood come out of your neck.
The only other way to do it without breaking anything with that, you'd have to pull the fletchings through because they're soft, and that's gonna stuck. I think the other crazy thing about this though is obviously the Saxons.
Yeah.
They beat them at Stamford Bridge and then turned around and fought the Normans in a matter of days down the other end of the country.
Oh wow! Oh
yeah, man. It was only a matter of days. A matter of days, mate. And they got there and they would have won. They would have won if they didn't just break formation. And that's insane. If that had gone to a Saxon victory, that would have been one of the biggest turnarounds ever. Literally.
I don't think it would be. I've seen some quick fights and some quick battles.
Fair, but in terms of especially with how much the army had to do, because like I said,
I'm talking about going across Europe.
Oh yeah, I'm talking. Yeah, that's fair. But I'm talking Britain. The best Britain got was defending itself for a long time. Yeah. So they had to march from the south already up there to meet them.
Yeah.
And then once they beat them, caught them by surprise because they got there quicker than they should have. They then turned around and did the same shit to the French.
Yeah.
If they had fucking won, if they'd have been more disciplined, but it's probably the fact they were so knackered they weren't.
Yeah.
If they'd have been more disciplined,
really
it would have been fucking nuts. two full on, hours long battles in 10 days probably.
Mate. It's so difficult to actually imagine trying to do that yourself.
No,
I couldn't
it's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you get shit like that happening like now, but we have tanks and jeeps and APCs and all these things that we can do now to get places quick.
Yeah.
So to do it then, fuck.
But I'm still talking quite medieval ages. There are quite crazy things that have happened.
Greeks and
the
Persian armies.
Well, that you might say put an end to ideas that England could be conquered by Norwegians or Danes or Vikings.
Well, they gave it a good go though.
The Viking era.
Good couple of 100 years.
Over.
Yeah.
Harald Hardrada, you can only say, well, he died like a Viking, making jokes, making poems, lashing out with both hands until he was killed.
I think it's the lack of fear that a lot of people gravitate towards the Vikings.
Yeah.
That fearlessness. Really sort of some people just love the idea of being that fearless, making a joke as you're about to die,
I mean, to be fair, they spent most of their lives in war, and it's just the kind of humour.
And just growing up around these people who have just seen death and just kill, and it's a part of their culture.
Seen and
so
contributed to.
Yeah, that's it. It's just part of it,
Well, they have the same sort of sense of humour as soldiers do.
Yeah.
So you hear about British soldiers in Iraq and the kind of jokes they're making. It's the same shit, American, whoever you're from.
Yeah.
They make the same kind of dark jokes. And it's just how you get through it, isn't
it? You do dark things, you've got to make dark jokes.
Yeah.
But can these poems really be attributed to Harald Hardrada?
I don't see there's any way that the poems could be genuine. After all, who was there to note it down or remember it? Practically none of the Norwegians survived. I expect Snorri Sturluson made them up himself to help his story out. But they're good poems. They express a kind of not regretful attitude, but it's sort of rueful. Yeah, well, we're not going to win this one. They caught us this time. Oh well, that's the way it goes. We will just have to fight it out.
It is what it
is. It is what it is. Mate, that sounds like duct tape for life.
Man. Yeah, man. And there you go. No wonder we like Vikings. That was just a really long, prolonged. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Stamford Bridge had unintended consequences, paving the way
here you
for
go.
to become King of England.
The Battle of Stamford Bridge was, of course, a catastrophe. It was a catastrophe for the Norwegians, but it was a catastrophe for the English as well, because they took very heavy casualties as well. And 3 weeks after the Battle of Stamford Bridge...
3 weeks, 10 days,
my
my
bad.
bad. Fucking hell. My bad. Fucking hell. Either way, at the time, to get a bunch of fucking peasant farmers to
There's
march.
already so many comments in the comments
I'm
box.
so screwed. Yeah, it is.
He figured it
It
out.
wasn't fucking 10 days, you stupid idiot.
If they'd been at full strength, they'd have won.
On the 14th of October 1066, the English army suffered a crushing defeat at Hastings, and Harold Godwinson was killed.
F for my guy. Gone too soon.
England's new king, William the Conqueror, was himself descended from a Viking adventurer.
She was.
The Viking Age was at an
Yeah,
end.
William the Conqueror is
For
Rollo's son.
centuries, Europe had been terrorized by Scandinavian warriors whose attitude to death gave them a dangerous
They
edge.
did.
Yeah, man.
What finally strikes me about the Viking mindset is not so much the defiance in the face of death, that's what you expect heroes to do. It's actually the matter-of-fact attitude, and also the liking for some kind of a joke. You can actually use vulgar words, like Ragnar in the snake pit. You can play dirty tricks, like Vurger with his Pledge of Allegiance. Or you can play practical jokes, like the Yomsviking getting the guy's hands cut off. Or you can nitpick about poetry, like Thormod and Harald Hardrada. All these say, death is coming, it's certain, but actually, I'm
Literally.
what I can do to make this memorable. What it makes me think is that when it comes to Vikings, you can kill them, and speaking as an Englishman, we did, over there. But frighten them, that's not going to work. They're always going to come back at you. You're not safe until the very last one of them is dead.
Now that is scary.
Yeah, man.
The thought of that is absolutely terrifying. Well, I really enjoyed that episode. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, that's banging.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
If you guys enjoyed our reaction to that, then please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. But we will catch you in the next episode.